Good evening and welcome. It's now 6 o'clock. I'm handing over to Dr. Norikida, the CEO of SOL. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mzulungile Notikida, and as the CEO of the South African Medical Association, it is my pleasure to welcome all of you tonight in this virtual webinar. And I hope you can hear me loud and clear. As many of you are aware, the recent changes implemented by the three provinces of Gauteng, Eastern Cape, Limpopo, and we've just recently heard that even the Free State is considering this, have had far-reaching implications and have sparked a significant unease among our own members and just in the medical community at large. What concerns some is that these changes were made unilaterally without proper consultation of some members, some of whom are very senior leaders in the clinical space in these provinces. The details are also very murky, with the only information that we have being the circulars that have been doing the rounds. And with Gauteng, they talk about the approval and the management of commuted overtime that will now be centralized within the department as a provincial office, basically stripping off the CEOs and the clinical managers of their authority to manage their resources within the institutions that they run. We also know that this will also have far-reaching implications in terms of the salary of doctors. We know that almost a third of doctors' salary is on basically is formed part of the overtime. We also know that in terms of the registrar program and teaching, the commuted overtime, the structure that currently exists allows for training to run smoothly. So we thought that it would be important that we bring in today the people who have experience in terms of teaching and who can just explore what would be the implications of these changes in the training platforms for the formation of medical doctors in the country. So with us today, we do have the Chief Executive Officer of the Colleges of Medicine, Professor Eric Boch. We also have among us today the Dean of Medicine at Sifako Mokgato Health Sciences University, Professor Nathaniel Mofolo. They will unpack the impact of these COT changes or in their respective spaces. I will just hand over to Dr. Oosthuizen just to cover the part of the background, and then we can then hand over to Professor Boch after that. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Dr. Norikida, and good evening, everyone. I'm William Oosthuizen, Head of SOMA Legal. As the CEO has mentioned, these are quite concerning developments. I think all of us know where they come from, the budgetary constraints, etc. But it is really a concern that SOMA members and senior clinicians in these provinces weren't properly consulted, and insights gleaned from past experiences dealing with commuted overtime, etc. From SOMA's side, having become aware of some of these changes, some of them being leaked internal memos, for instance, we've addressed letters to the various provinces, the head of departments, even the MEC in certain cases, to try and say to them, listen, let's have a meeting, let's discuss our concerns and see whether we can forge a way forward that is in the interests of everyone involved. Yes, there are legitimate concerns about irregular expenditure and abuse of the system, etc. But we also foresee serious trouble in how this is going to be implemented. and the practicalities around it. So we had sent a number of letters, and unfortunately, because of the lack of response from the various provinces, we were also forced into sending legal correspondence. Throughout March, we've sent about 1 or 2 letters, which we had followed up again in April, just putting all of our concerns on the table and basically putting the relevant departments on terms, indicating that if the harm that we foresee would befall our members, we'd have no choice but to enforce our rights and those of our members, and that's more or less where we are. And I'll provide some more information on that later. Back to you, CEO.
Thank you so much, William, and thank you for that background. I think now we'll hand over to Professor Eric Bock from the Colleges of Medicine, the CEO. Over to you, Prof. Eric.
Thanks very much. Just wait for my video to come on. Maybe I should add that I was formerly the Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences at the University of Pretoria as well. So I am able to bring some of that experience into this input as well. So I think my starting point and my vantage point is tied to the purpose of the Colleges of Medicine of South Africa. And our purpose is to promote the highest degree of skill and efficiency in medical and dental practice, and to cultivate the highest ethical standards and professional conduct, not for pecuniary profit, but for the betterment of humanity. And our mission includes the commitment to sustain and improve postgraduate medical education and training in Southern Africa, and to play a continuing role in issues affecting medical standards and the structure and function of healthcare services. And so really from our perspective, what we're hearing about commuted overtime really goes against the goals of the highest degree of skill and efficiency in medical and dental practice, and impacts on postgraduate medical education and training, and ultimately on the standards and the structure and function of the healthcare services and patients. And so it's from that vantage point that I answer the question that I've been asked about the impact on registrar time and clinical exposure of the proposals. Now, as was said earlier, the exact details of the changes seem to vary. They're a bit murky, but I think if one looks at the essence of it, it's what I would call the 3 C's around commuted overtime. The 4th C is commuted, but the first one is to cut overtime, the second is to cancel overtime, and the third is to centralize the decision-making around commuted overtime. And each one of those is of concern, in particular around how you implement it. So for me, there's a principle at stake here. And the first principle is that given that services are needed in a hospital 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we're not a supermarket that can close at 5, 6, or 8 o'clock and then open the next day. We have to provide care for patients both in the hospital and coming to the hospital 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And in effect, when colleagues are employed for 40 hours a week, there's still another 124 hours in the week that has to be covered, albeit that the services are not as intense, maybe at nights and on the weekends. There are still patients there that need to be cared for and learning that needs to be provided. So given that these services are needed, the question is the expectation that doctors will still work the overtime without payment? Now, surely that can't be anticipated. So what the question is what is it then? Is it to cut the number of doctors working so that those working work harder? Is it to try and control it? But certainly for me, if the work is done, then it needs to be paid for. That angle of it is not really the matter of the colleges of medicine. That's more a matter for SAMA to mobilize on and engage on. Now, from my perspective, I'm cognizant of the fiscal constraints of government and in the health service, and I'm cognizant of the need for departments to fulfill their responsibilities to effectively manage the overtime and the commuted overtime of doctors. And so I don't have any difficulty with effective and efficient management and we support ethical and efficient and appropriate management of commuted overtime, as with any other aspect of human resources in the health sector, as well as, in fact, any other aspect of running hospitals. We would support ethical and efficient and appropriate management of pharmaceuticals, of clinical services, and so on. But you asked me to focus on the impact that this will have on registrar time and clinical exposure. Now, to me, there are two lines of impact. And the first one is the obvious one and seems to be getting most of the attention. And that is what happens in these overtime hours. And for me, the question is whose overtime is going to be cut? Now, if we're going to cut registrars' overtime, for example, then where is the service going to come from? If you are going to cut the academic specialists, the specialists, the principal specialists, the heads of clinical units, heads of clinical departments, if the aim is to cut their overtime, then who's going to provide the supervision? And my understanding of the HPCSA rules is that registrars can't work unsupervised. So if their supervisors are not doing commuted overtime, then will the registrars be actually legally allowed to work? And if all of this comes together, who's going to provide the care? Now, that's not to suggest that I think that all the specialists are on duty in the hospitals all the time. That is not required. But certainly, there has to be a line of supervision. And therefore, the impact is that after hours work in the other 124 hours a month is going to be seriously impacted in terms of patient care and in terms of opportunities for registrars to obtain supervised learning. And what are the implications for completing their time requirements? Of course, it'll also mean that the registrars would have less emergency experience and a much more narrowed clinical exposure because they'll be losing out of that exposure. So patients will lose, registrars will lose. But for me, the impact of this policy of cut and cancel actually goes wider. And that's, for me, the second line of impact. And very often when policies are made, my sense is that those making the policies have a linear understanding of what they're trying to achieve, which might be savings, for example, or it might be that there's concern that too many people are getting paid overtime that might not be worked. Whatever the idea is, you also have to look at the adverse effects of the policy as you try and improve it and or change it. And to me, the most critical adverse effect of this policy would be from an academic and teaching and learning perspective, would be the loss of academic specialists in the public sector. Now, we already struggle to keep specialists, especially in disciplines like surgery, the surgical disciplines of all kinds. It's very hard to keep top specialists and academics who we depend on to train the next generation of generations of specialists. And they are there because of their dedication to the public sector and to the academic proposition. But the truth is that they could earn much, much more in private practice, 2, 3, 4, 5 times what they're earning in the public sector. And now, if you're going to cut maybe 40% or 30%, depending on which kind roughly of their income, when they're already earning less, so much less than their peers in private, the question is, at what point do you squeeze hard enough and squeeze them out? And once, academic programs take a long time to build, the capacity takes long, but it's easy and quick to implode. And we have to, it's my view that implementing this policy of cut and cancel in the manner that seems to be expressed could face a severe adverse effect of significant losses to the public sector, both to patients who depend on the specialists for access to tertiary and central health services, as well as to registrar training. And if you lose the specialists, it leads to a number of other knock-on effects. I've mentioned the harm to patient care and lack of access to specialist care. There would be less supervised clinical exposure, not just at nights and on the weekends, but if you're losing your specialists during the working hours of the week. And there'll be less, for example, theatre cases being done, more complex cases. And what that means is that registrars would be at risk of not being able to meet the supervision requirements for their training of what they're supposed to have been supervised and have done. There's the risk they won't be able to complete their logbooks because, for example, if you lose your cardiothoracic surgeons, your neurosurgeons, and your ENT surgeons and so on, then where will the candidates be able to complete all the procedures under supervision that are required? There'll also be poorer supervised workplace-based learning, and that means that learning will be compromised. And workplace-based learning is the essence of the training of specialists, and is critical to achieve the competence and the entrustment to be able to achieve entrustable professional activities in your discipline, and ultimately for your success in your exams. Because what our structured oral exams that we run are there to test clinical reasoning, clinical judgment, clinical decision-making, and that's what you learn in the day-to-day supervised practice. And the less that happens, the less the success in exam rates. So one of the adverse consequences is that you may find that college exam rates, which have been pass rates, which have been improving, may slide backwards again. If people fail more, it's longer registrar time and less place for new registrars, and it damages your pipeline. So for me, that for me would be how I see the impact on registrar time and clinical exposure of what we're hearing. And as we keep saying, it's murky, it's not precisely clear, but I worry about the direct and the indirect adverse effects of what is coming through. So I want to sort of end by making a few comments on the way forward. And I want to emphasize that personally, I have no objection to the proper management of overtime. So if the concern is that overtime lists are getting padded and people are getting third on call and fourth on call that are not necessary in some disciplines and are never called, and it's just there to make up the hours. I have no difficulty, if that's the concern, that gets managed. But you need to manage the overtime without damaging patient care and without damaging clinical exposure and training. And so what you have to do is, if you're planning to manage, don't mess it up the way you manage it, but manage it in a fair and just and consultative manner, that with responsibility. And then for me, I said at the beginning, that's the 3 C's of cut, cancel, and centralize. As many of you may know, I'm a professor in the School of Health Systems and Public Health at the University of Pretoria, and my focus area and the area which I teach is health policy and management. And what we know from the literature, what we know is that it doesn't work to centralize. And it seems that we have a pattern in the public sector. Whenever there's something that we're concerned about, we centralize it, whether it's the filling of posts, whether it's commuted overtime, and that does not work. It creates centralized bottlenecks. It creates bad decision-making. And we saw that when hospital CEOs and hospital managers had to submit centrally for each post to be filled, besides the fact that there was a bottleneck, it took the decision-making responsibility away from the CEOs. And so people would just send in a long list. And so they knew which were their 50 most critical posts, but they'd send in a list for 300 and then wait to see which ones they got filled and which didn't. They'd have a bash. And how would the people sitting in a centralized head office know what's really required on the ground? And I believe it's the same here with commuted overtime, is that we need to follow established global best practice on managing hospitals. We need to delegate to the hospital CEOs and the clinical managers who know their reality to manage it within a framework and a properly structured agreement around what is fair in terms of commuted overtime, because the principle is not just that because you work in the public sector, you are entitled to commuted overtime regardless of whether you do any work or not. Otherwise, it would just be part of the salary. So there is an expectation that commuted overtime work must be fulfilled, and there are various ways and models of fulfilling it. Sometimes when you are, some places say where if you're on call but not in the hospital, then every 2 hours counts as 1 hour, or 3 hours counts as 1 hour towards commute overtime. All of those kind of issues need to be clarified. They need to be transparent. And then managers need to be given the responsibility to manage it, but to be held accountable for managing within these frameworks that have been thoroughly worked out and properly consulted. So for me, that's my view in terms of the impact, and maybe 1 or 2 thoughts on the way forward. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. We really appreciate that. And I think South Africa is known globally for producing the best doctors in the world, and it would be irresponsible to tamper with that machinery without proper consultation, because managing resources efficiently is not a problem, but I think the proper consultation is really what concerns the association. That very senior members of our association who are leading were really not consulted in these instances. I think I'll thank you very much, Prof. And then the second speaker is the Dean of Medicine at Sifako Makgatho Health Sciences University, Professor Nathaniel Mofolo. I'll hand over to you, Prof. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, colleagues, and Sama, and the CEO, Dr. Nodikida. Colleagues, I hope you hear me well, because I'm going to make profound statements. And I want to dovetail on what Professor Brook Book said in his introduction or opening statements. I just want to highlight to say from the onset, Commuted over time, directly and indirectly, is related to clinical services. And those clinical services also includes after-hour care and also includes emergency care. This relates directly to the National Health Act as promulgated, National Health Act of 61. And emergency care is part of that parcel, which is clearly stipulated in Chapter 2, 4, and 11 of the National Health Act. Now, Commuted over time, because I've been asked to speak on the clinical training platform, I just need to mention that the definition of clinical platform, training platform, is not yet highlighted in the National Health Act. But what we have what we call academic health complexes. On that note, I just need to mention that as the Dean of School of Medicine at Sefako Makgatho Health Sciences University, also the chair of the South African Committee of Medical Deans, which represent all medical schools in South Africa. Currently, we have 10, there's 11, 12. As you are aware that we have the 11th one is Nelson Mandela, the 12th one is going to be in Northwest. So I'm chairing the subcommittee on clinical training platform with the South African Committee of Medical Deans. In the National Health Act, there is no word that speaks to clinical training platform, but we have what we call academic healthcare complexes. Now, academic healthcare complexes refers to one or more health establishment at all levels of the national health system. That includes peripheral facilities, one or more educational institutions working together to educate and train healthcare personnel. And I just want to underscore healthcare personnel. So, which means it's not limited to doctors. It includes emergency care personnel, it includes nurses, it includes allied healthcare professionals, all healthcare personnel to work together in terms of training to conduct research in health services and coordinating of such of training, including committees, in order to perform such function as prescribed by the National Healthcare Act. So I think I just need to highlight that principle. Number two is to make sure, is just to bring it to remembrance that the occupational specific dispensation, the OSD, for medical and medicinal practitioners, pharmaceuticals, as well as EMS personnel, it started initially in 2004, 2007. It was then a follow-up up until 2008. It identified those specific healthcare workforce that needs to be provided in terms of the OSD. And that pertains to scarce skills, and it made provision for scarce skills and rural allowance. Now, I just need to mention, as a follow through to what my colleague Prof. Book has highlighted. Commuted overtime, as you are well aware that patients, we are offering in terms of the National Health Care Act is 24 hours, 7 services throughout the year. That includes public holidays, it includes weekends, and patients don't choose when to present. But studies have shown that almost 70% of emergencies present after hours and weekends. And 95% of mortalities are shown to be presenting mostly around weekends. So the clinical training that a platform should have, it should be able to accommodate 24-hour services 7 days a week, 365 or quarter of a day in the year, irrespective. And we know that commuted overtime accounts for 30% of salaries. But most importantly, commuted overtime, it needs to be commensurate with the health care needs of the facility. Currently, we have a challenge where the health facilities are not able to adequately account for the amount of overtime that they are paying for. But now the challenge is that challenge is now being deflected for the central administration to handle. I think that is a matter of concern to all of us. Commuted overtime is a matter of management and accountability at facility level. It will be an indictment to redirect responsibility to central office to manage that on behalf of the COs. It will then bring to question, what is the function of the chief executive officer of the facility? If the chief executive officer of the facility can't be held accountable for what is the numbers of hours that the healthcare personnel spent, so I think for us is a serious area of concern. So accountability, although we accept that the accountability rests with the head of the department, but does not absolve that the chief executive officers appointed at facility level. So we understand that there is going to be a periodic review and control measures in place. And I can confidently say so because I have, prior to this meeting, consulted with the National Health Department, the DDG there of health in terms of human resource and infrastructure. That is underway in terms of the periodic review and control measures. But I think we need to squarely place the challenge where it belongs. It is at facility level. Because in a normal day-to-day schedule, we need to make sure that the normal working hours, 40 days a week, maximum 45 hours in a week, are accounted for. Then the commuted overtime, in terms of the levels in which it is assigned based on the number of hours, is accounted for before the remuneration work of outside public service is considered. So those are the different levels of check that we need to make sure that there's accountability. But currently, unfortunately, we find that that is not the case. There's not a full accountability to that. And it is the failure of the system at facility level that is now instigating this level of intervention of centralizing. We know that centralizing, it does not help if there's no accountability and proper systems at facility level. So it's not going to solve the solution. It's not going to solve the problem. So I think in terms of clinical training platform, and just following up on what my colleague said, Professor Book, we have experience where now, for instance, he mentioned neurosurgery and cardiothoracic surgery in terms of the registrars complying with the number of cases that they require to be able to qualify to sit for the college exit exam does not hold. I mean, cardiothoracic surgery has been curtailed in that instance, neurosurgery. If commuted overtime is cut off or reduced or centralized, it's going to affect the number of cases that are required as essential to be able to show competency. We are now moving towards a dispensation across all medical schools in training to make sure that we are on the same wavelength in terms of intrustable professional activities and work-based assessments that each specialty must uphold in terms of specialists to be registrable with the Health Professions Council of South Africa. So we are there to make sure that the quality of training, irrespective of where you train, is the same across board. So then the exposure is very critical. If you limit that exposure, you are really hampering or making an impediment for registrars and specialist training in South Africa. And just to amplify that is to say that this is where now we need to make sure that clinical exposure, clinical training is optimized to make sure that quality is not compromised and to make sure that our specialists finish on time. As a dean, the current challenge that I'm facing and we are facing, I can speak with authority in that matter across board, across all medical schools, is that our registrars specialist training, they are not able to finish their training on time. Number one is related to exposure of clinical cases that they must acquire. Number two, while it's related to research, we're looking close into how we can make research much more should I say, much more registrar focused. We're looking at retrospective data analysis instead of prospective studies. We're looking at biobank, where registrars can tap into a biobank instead of doing retrospective, because registrar training is just about exposing students to research methodology and protocols It's not about really going, toward a PhD level or more prospective studies that will require much time and resources. They just need to grasp, because it's a mini dissertation. It's not as opposed to a master's of, as opposed to full masters. So I think that's where we need to pitch this, to make sure that we have the resources to make sure that there is maximum exposure without limiting exposure. Making sure that we're able to produce the training that is required, the caliber of candidates that are required to serve the national, the nation. We know that we are training beyond just South Africa. We are training actually for the national and abroad, because most of the students, of the qualifiers, they're not limited just to work in South Africa. I think for me, that is a very critical discourse that we need to look into in terms of committed overtime. So that will be my input for now. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that input, Prof. And I think you're touching on very, very important points there. And I can see even colleagues on the charts that people are asking, why are we not pushing for an increase on the basic salary of doctors? If you are not given a chance to even engage and just at a stroke of a pen, somebody decides to write a circular, then you don't have space to engage, because those are some of the things that we've been very clear that you cannot discuss committed overtime without discussing the basic salaries of doctors. We could negotiate a percentage of whatever amount that's there that should form part of the basic salaries of doctors. But when the door is shut and you are not allowed to even engage in terms of making these changes, it becomes impossible for a contribution to be made. So I'm going to hand over to our legal head again to just cover what we have done, so that our members can also understand that we have not been sitting on our hands. We've been doing quite a lot of work in this, and we want to continue to try and engage even national, because we also don't think that provinces should be doing this ad hocly. National should provide leadership on this and engage these provinces. So over to you, Dr. Oosthuizen.
Well, thanks again to you, and thanks so much everyone for the very valuable contributions. And I think what we have up until this point tried to do is raise exactly the concerns that have been raised by Professor Buch and Professor Nathaniel. It is really concerning that seemingly these considerations haven't been taken into account. And I see on the Q&A as well that this could potentially have severe consequences for patient care. I think we need to distinguish between a couple of things first. So commuted overtime, and the fact that overtime forms such a large part of doctors' salaries, that is already a major problem. And I think something that SOMA is actively engaging with and lobbying for. We've done studies on exactly this, where it's clear that there isn't parity in the public sector between what other civil servants, professionals earn versus what doctors earn. And as mentioned, commuted overtime for a large number of doctors makes up probably about 30% of their take-home salary, and is also not pensionable. And I mean, that is just an untenable and unsustainable situation. So that is an area that we are busy addressing with HR and putting across the studies that we've done and lobbying for our doctors actively. On this specific issue around commuted overtime and the changes that that we don't really have a lot of clarity on. And I think that's one of the main concerns, is this lack of clarity, because we don't necessarily know the impact that this will have, whether our doctors will get their payments if they do comply with the requirements, if they do put in their claims, etc. Will they receive the money that is owed to them? And that's a situation that we're currently monitoring. And I do urge everyone involved in this call, if you do not receive payments that are due to you, or if you at your facility see that you are being prejudiced or that patient care is being prejudiced in any way, please reach out to SAMA urgently, because it's on the basis of that feedback that we'll be able to take further action. Just legally, in terms of commuted overtime and overtime. So I know there have been calls for interdicts and to review this decision, etc. And I have to be honest, we've spoken to junior as well as senior counsel on this issue. And unfortunately, because this is overtime, and overtime is discretionary and tied to operational requirements, we aren't on steady legal footing if we were to outright challenge it at this stage without harm being done already. If we were to take this to court, and this is the opinion that we've received from senior counsel, court will point to the fact that, is this a rational decision? And seemingly on the basis of what we currently have before us, this is a decision aimed at stifling irregular expenditure. And this is a requirement that has come down on the provinces from the Auditor General, etc. So it's tricky. I think we've heard what the previous speakers have said, and it's definitely very, very, it makes a persuasive argument. And I think as soon as there is harm that comes from this change in policy, those are exactly the sort of arguments that were put on the table. And in fact, it's exactly what we've said to the various provinces. These are the concerns that we have. We are monitoring the situation. And when these unintended consequences do occur, you've now been placed on terms, and we won't hesitate to approach the courts to protect the interests of our members and the patients. But that harm hasn't as of yet occurred. Yes, we foresee that it may occur, but it hasn't yet occurred, and therefore it leaves us in a very tricky situation. Regarding the lack of consultation, I think that's one of our main concerns, and an area that we are currently exploring. As Prof. Buch has said, this needs to be fair, it needs to be just, and it needs to be consultative. We're not at all saying that pay people that aren't really putting in the hours and abusing the system. That's not what we're saying. But if you do work overtime, you have to be compensated therefore. And unfortunately, it is a reality that our health system is built on the backs of people basically working themselves to the bone because we have such a lack of resources. So I would urge everyone on this call to please, as soon as you see an inkling of this policy going wrong or being implemented in a manner that could lead to harm, immediately reach out to SAMA. I think one of the other things that we will do is we will continue to lobby. I think Dr. Nodikida has indicated that we will be in touch and have been in touch with the National Department of Health on this issue. I think one of the initiatives that we're also trying to do is get everybody to co-sign an open letter, especially with the concerns that have been raised here tonight and some of the other ancillary concerns that have been raised around over time. And that's an area where we also really need everyone to stand together so that we really come out in force. Of course, being an essential service, we are limited in the sort of industrial action that we can take in terms of strikes, etc. But that doesn't mean that we cannot apply pressure in the media and in other avenues. And that is really what I think we intend to do going forward. So I do please urge everyone to monitor the situation, these policy changes that have been very murky, and to bring those to our attention immediately if you're not being paid what you're owed, or if you see that for some reason this is having a negative impact on patient care. reach out to SAMA immediately so that we can take action. And I'll throw back to Dr. Norikida for additional input on this.
No, thank you very much, William. I think it is very clear the negative impact that these changes would have from an academic and a training point of view. But I think Dr. Nicholas Fine on the chart makes a very good point when he talks about 30 to 40% of the country is rural, and it relies on understaffed, under-resourced hospitals already. So there is an impact at the lowest level of care and at the deep rural areas of our country. The implications at that levels are dire. I mean, the point that Nicholas is making there. I don't know if people who are leading these provinces have taken into account all of these things, and the fact that there's no capacity at HR to even be able to manage what they are proposing. So I think we are very happy with the input that we're getting today, because it almost becomes clear, William, that on the ground, there's actually harm that is being done already. The example is also the Gauteng Department of Health that is applying double standards. In one district, the people have signed a 1-year contract of overtime, which is what is normal. And the other ones have been given 3 months and they have not been paid. So we urge all of these members who are directly affected by these things to immediately contact SAMA, because then this strengthens SAMA's legal argument that harm is already being done. And I would urge also Dr. Nicholas Fine to also contact SAMA as soon as possible with the rosters at the deep rural areas being directly affected. So all of these things, colleagues, I think they strengthen the position that SAMA has taken on this, that it is borderline irresponsible for these provinces to just at a stroke of a pen think that they could simply change the way things were done without proper consultation of very senior clinical people within their space. So I will be taking William and Prof. I don't know if one of you wants to take the comment by Professor Mtla, that both basic, I think he makes a point that both basic and postgraduate training will be affected by these changes. Anyone who wants to take that, specifically saying all the programs from undergraduate to postgraduate training will be negatively impacted. Anyone who wants to take it, Prof. Nathaniel or Prof. Bob? Prof. Nathaniel?
Yeah, I can respond to that. That is indeed the case, in the sense that you need to prove that there is 24/7 cover throughout the entire year. And if you cannot prove that, then there's a problem, because not all health establishments are the same based on the number of consultant cover that we have. I'll just make a case in point in terms of psychiatry. At Dr. George Mukhara Academic Hospital, we only have 3 psychiatrists full-time who are appointed. Now, can you tell me in a logical sense, how can 3 full-time psychiatrists cover 24 hours, 7 days a week, 24, throughout the year, to supervise students, undergraduate, postgraduate registrars who are on call? That's impossible. So if you don't look at facility in terms of capacity to be able to render 24-hour service 7 days a week throughout the year, then we're in trouble. It cannot be one size fits all. So you need to look at each facility individually and holistically. So I do agree that this will have a domino effect at undergraduate and postgraduate level, depending on each facility.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prof. I see that Dr. Mahlati has joined us here and has commented quite extensively. And indeed, Doc, this is exactly what we've been saying as summer, that National should take a lead on this. And of course, our focus for this evening was to look at the impact on the training platforms. But I just don't understand how can provinces decide ad hocly that they would change a national policy of overtime. So I agree 100%. And I think from where we stand as summer, we remain very willing, which is why we've been writing the letters to all these provinces to say, sit down and engage, because you cannot be narrow in your approach when you're trying to make these changes, because they affect other areas of medical training. So we're more than willing, and we will indeed engage you on this. I think there is a comment there, William. I'm not sure if you... there's a from Dr. Khan that says we need to be preemptive and stop this, rather than waiting for it to happen and then fight it. Do you want to take that, William?
Yeah, certainly, and I mean it's really a difficult issue. As alluded to in our discussions with council, he indicated that we really are on not the strongest legal footing when it comes to an issue of overtime, with it being discretionary and subject to operational requirements. And he indicated that the chances of success in a review are quite bleak if we aren't able to provide more substantive evidence of harm. And that is why it is so critical that we try and collect that, and just to indicate where you can send that information. It's labor@samedical.org, and we'll certainly give it the attention it deserves. I think one of the things that we are pushing to be preemptive is through our lobbying efforts in trying to engage the provinces. And I'm glad that Dr. Mhlati is in the chat. We definitely want to engage you as well, Dr. Mhlati, and I think we have raised our concerns about this, and we are really concerned about some of these issues falling upon deaf ears with the provinces. We've really tried to be as cordial as possible in raising these issues, and unfortunately, because we haven't had any responses, we've had to resort to legal correspondence. And that is certainly not the route that we prefer to take. We want to sit down with you and to raise all of these issues to ensure that it is addressed in the interests of everybody, taking into account all of the factors that have been mentioned here today around training, the salaries of doctors, as well as the financial sustainability of the department and the current resource constraints. So we really want to work together towards solutions, but if failing that, we'll have no other option but to seek additional redress.
Yeah, I think our members need to help us on this, William, by making the submission. Is it possible that we can also have the labor email address flighted here, William? And just to also indicate that we've got a survey that is running on this issue, where our members can actually also put in some of the complaints here. I guess, William, this is also legally related, that how is it legal to cut overtime for doctors in some province and not in others? This is the part that we just dealt with. Surely it should be nationally decided. This is exactly the point we're making to national. There's a question there, other unions such as Hospesa are also taking up the fight for overtime. How can our employment conditions be changed without consultation? To lose such a large part of our salary will cause a mass exodus of doctors. Why are they focusing on the doctors' overtime when there are many other issues that needs to be addressed, such as mismanagement? You know, so our members are actually asking the questions, William, that we've been dealing with. and I think the double standard of Gauteng. And then there's a question also that comes that says, what is SAMA's position on the notion that the commuted overtime should be direct compensation of work done, and the contracting therefore based on the need as defined by the facility. This is exactly what we are saying, that if that is removed from the facility, how does the facility knows? Yeah, I think Zianda is answering that in terms of putting our position there. And then I'm trying to read all the questions before our time. We're left with 1 minute. Most are actually comments.
But can I maybe come in here? I'm worried
please,
you're saying we're left with 1 minute only.
Yeah, please come in, William.
I just want to clarify that I did not say there's a formal policy of cut and cancel. I said the impression that many people have is that the policy is to cut and to cancel, and that some of the way communication has been affected has given effect to that concern. But what I would say is, Dr. Percy Maklati is the Deputy Director General responsible for tertiary hospitals, and human resources. And he's offered in the chat to share some further background and facts on the matter. And I'm sort of, I don't know if it's my job as a guest of SAMA here to say, you have an extraordinary offer from, one of the second to the Director General in the Department of Health. You have the Deputy Director General who's offering to share further information and insight because of misapprehensions and misunderstandings around this. I wonder if one shouldn't invite him to clarify.
So that's the plan. I think we really, I mean, if national, I mean, these are provinces that are and it's 3, if not 4 provinces that are doing all of these things. So, and I think it's impactful. Its impact is enough to generate national intervention, which is why I'm also glad that Dr. Percy is here to actually try and address these things. And I think for SAMA, really, what we are looking for is for our members to let us know what is happening on the ground so that we can strengthen our case, because we think this goes beyond just doctors. It affects patients. It's a human rights issue, because there are patients who are not getting the services that they're supposed to get on the basis of whatever policies that are being implemented. Just today, we got a complaint from the Limpopo province that doctors are now being made to work shift work, which is unheard of, and completely unacceptable. So it's important that members let us know of all of these things that they are going through on the ground so that we can build our case. And if needs be, we'll engage the universities and the colleges of medicine like we've done here, so that they can give us letters of support as well as we approach the courts. And that is if everything that we're trying fails, including engaging national to rein on these provinces, honestly, not to willy-nilly change the conditions of employment for doctors. So colleagues, I think if there's nothing else, colleagues, I think because of time, because we've allocated 1 hour, I do want to agree with Eric that we probably would need to come back to this as it develops and unfolds. I think the call really is for our members to look out for the survey and also to directly contact SAMA. William, I'm going to ask you to just repeat that email. And if possible, we can also just post it here. I don't see if it's posted. And then we can maybe just have closing remarks from the 2 professors, and we can say good night to our participants. Prof Mafolo? Oh, okay, go first, William.
All right, thanks everyone. It's labor@samedical.org.
Labor@samedical.org. It's that simple. Okay. We will also just put it on our social media platform so that members can also just contact us, get in touch with us. Prof, just closing remarks.
Yeah, from my side is to say that healthcare, including emergency care, is a constitutional matter which should not be compromised. And I would like to leave it at that we should make sure that normal care, emergency care, and all types of care from every level of care are afforded to the populace of South Africa without any compromise. And I think that is a fundamental issue for the Constitution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prof. And there's an association that was formed to unite doctors for the health of that nation, where we commit to live to that purpose of our existence. Can I hand over to you, Prof. Berg, for closing remarks? And there is the email cited. Thanks.
Yes. So once again, I want to emphasize that with a commitment to training of medical specialists to excellence in the public health sector for the care of all our people who depend on the public sector, and for fair labor practice, there needs to be a fair system of overtime. And that fair system must include ensuring that there's fair work coming back against fair remuneration, and that disciplines are adequately covered, and that we don't compromise patient care, nor that compromise training of, in our case, College of Medicine is a postgraduate organization. We think about the training of specialists in the country. So that's our view is we look forward to a consultative process that brings balance to this controversial issue without damaging the profile of doctors in the public sector and specialists, without damaging patient care, and without damaging training of specialists, but at the same time is a process that is ethical and that is fair in its decision making, and that is effectively managed properly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Berg. And I think we can see there's quite a lot of questions that are coming from the chats. But colleagues, we have run out of time, and it is really sad. I mean, one of the questions says that there are doctors who are working shifts and the others are working normal hours, others have overtime, others have no overtime in the same province. So I think we really need to get our house in order. This is really mismanagement of the system. You can't have an animal farm in the same hospital. The doctor is employed in different working conditions. It's really not acceptable. But colleagues, we will stop here tonight. We'll definitely have a part 2 of this, and by then we probably would have engaged with national, and we can bring them to join us, and hopefully they might bring these provinces on board to join us and be able to explain themselves in terms of why would they do things like this without necessarily consulting with the people who are actually the engine in terms of the health system itself. So I take this opportunity, thank you, the panelists, and I thank you, all of you, for making the time to come, and we'll definitely have a part 2 on this. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you.